Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. This is Kevin Hoare, and it is the 13th of May. And welcome to the show. I'm going to kind of run through the news, flying solo again here tonight. But I hope that this is really going to be interesting for you because we've got some great stuff lined up for you. Number one is that it turns out that Kate Brown, yeah, Tina Kotek has signed 33 bills into Oregon law this week. At least 30 of the new bills become law this week, and here's what they are. By the way, there's a link in this article to 33 bills, but as it would turn out to be the case, 33 bills that there's a link that says Oregon lawmakers propose bill to limit the number of bills after session hits record. So here's what we got. There's a law that tells the Department of Transportation and the State Department of Fish and Wildlife to create an advisory group in relation to a program to reduce cars hitting wildlife. One of the chief concerns, of course, that we have in the state. Don't you remember that all over the last election? Yeah, me neither. A law that allows the state to contract with some research firms that get federal grant money without having to follow state rules for contracting for goods and services. This goes into effect 91 days after the session ends. Gee, I wonder if they're going to have a bunch of inside deals and no bid projects. Yes. Well, they won't be doing with as much federal money, I guess. A law that prohibits selling or offering for sale a timeshare without a license and establishes a real estate license for timeshare agents. And so they're going to start regulating that. And a lot of people do have problems with the timeshare industry. But this bill will take effect on January 1st of 2026 because it's an emergency. A law that allows agencies, the State Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Marine Board and the State Department of Agriculture to work with others, such as tribal government, or local service outlet to inspect boats for harmful animals and plants. Another law removes the annual cap on matching funds for individual development account holders and creates a cap for total matching funds to an account for the effects of inflation. There's a PERS law. There's a something that affects the state tax statutes, no specifics. It designates October 12th as the Oregon Farmer and Rancher Day. No, it's nice. Makes changes to the laws of unemployment and paid leave programs run by the Employment Department. Doesn't say what those law changes are, so I guess in a summary, that's a fail. A law that allows state parks and recreation employees, such as park managers and park rangers, to keep their home address private in the Oregon Department of Transportation records. The employer's address will be listed instead. I guess that's probably going to become more and more prevalent over time because everybody's going to want that. A law that changes the funding and use of emergency housing account programs. Really? What about the law that demands that they find out what happened to the $450 million that they lost track of, that auditors said they lost track of? It says that you cannot buy or sell winning lottery tickets, thus deduct the purchase price for state taxes. I guess this is a way of trying to make people pay a bunch of taxes off their lottery winnings. All right. It goes on and on and on. And to be honest, I'm not really seeing any ones that really address the top issues that people are concerned about. That should be no surprise, actually. So let's move on to the next story. Apparently, the Pacific Northwest dream of having clean energy is not happening, and there's a story in OPB talking about how the dream of green energy fell apart. Now, Oregon and Washington have spent gobs of money on this. We know, billions. And they had aggressive goals to decarbonize their power supply, but they left it, as it says here, to the Bonneville Power Administration to build the transmission lines needed for wind and solar. And they don't have them. They weren't built. And so their master plan has failed. And this is, of course, a thing that liberals care a great deal about in two very liberal states. And it turns out that there are actually Republican-led states with roughly the same population and usable volume of wind as Oregon that have built enough wind farms to generate 3 times as much wind power. Of course, the dirty little secret is they're trying to get rid of this stuff because those other states are regretful that they bothered to invest so heavily in it. It's obviously not delivering there either in the way they had hoped. And but the badly needed upgrades to the electrical grid, which is almost a century old in some places, haven't happened. This sounds like something organized by the same people who brought you one failed information technology project after another. But I guarantee you a bunch of people got rich off of this. That's how they roll in Salem. People are making money. There is no doubt about it. And one of the guys who can't stop talking about clean energy is admitting, his name's Mark Gamba, who would like to ban natural gas, by the way. He said, we're absolutely looking at rolling blackouts. We're absolutely looking at not hitting any of our climate targets when it comes to energy production. Well, I actually think that it would be great not to hit the climate targets so that we don't have rolling blackouts. But he connects the two as saying that you have to have both. I think we're going to find that you might get neither situation resolved. Anyway, next story. The Iberian Nightmare forecasts a future using only renewable energy. And that is the story of what happened to Spain when they had a massive power outage just a few months ago. And that's written by our friend Jeff Reynolds, who is, it was Spain and Portugal. And it was April 28th, and they just had a nationwide failure, which at first they kind of didn't tell the truth about. And the total time for 2 nations to go completely dark was only 5 seconds. And it was just due to sudden fluctuations in the electrical supply. When they looked into this more, they really found out that they, again, also don't have an electrical grid up to the task. They had all kinds of things failing. We know that there was a fire at Heathrow Airport where they also had their power knocked out and the backup generators were failing. So this is just a lot of people that aren't ready for clean energy, and maybe because clean energy isn't really the way to go when it comes to making sure that you can have the lights turned on and stay on, which is really the whole point. It really is. Let me see if I can get to Facebook because I'm not getting the feed that I usually get. Anyway, next story. Did we just blow up a dam for no reason? This is an interesting story because, we've taken out some of our dams, and this is now being questioned quite poignantly by in the Oregon Catalyst and a lot of libertarians, actually. And see, I can't find the article on this, so I apologize. I would post it, but we're having a problem posting right now anyway. So I don't know really how to get this article to you. So let's skip to the next one. There's a Republican push to sell public lands. The purpose of that in the West here is to free up land for development, building housing, but also, and to ease the housing crisis, but also when there's resources available to exploit those resources so we don't have to import them from places like Russia and China. But it's rekindling a fight where Democrats and so-called conservationists are now fighting back and saying we can't sell anything. So there's cities that absolutely need this land. The federal government owns, I think, 60% of Oregon, and it's true, equally true, or almost as true in many other states. And now there are 12 states that are fighting back, including in Utah, which is leading the way. Montana is another, and so right now a battle's afoot, and the Democrats want to keep the West locked up as federal lands, and the Republicans want to start freeing that up and returning it to the people of those states. Southern border apprehensions dropped 93% from April 2024 to April 2025. Of course, we know most of that happened in just the first 3 months of this year. But there was also a trick that the Biden administration had going last year where they said people weren't being apprehended at the border because they were just letting them in through the ports of entry if they filled out the CBP One app. So now we are starting to see massive drug seizures and a stoppage of this, what's coming in from the southern border. Let's remember one thing. Democrats said that there was absolutely no way that we could, oops, did I lose my, nope, here we go. Democrats are saying there's absolutely no way we could secure the southern border unless we, oh, good, I see you, Lori. I'll start posting some of these there, thank you. That we could secure the border without passing a law. Remember the so-called border security law, which is the great bipartisan compromise. Democrats ran on it and beat up Republicans who opposed it. Turns out we didn't need it at all. We just needed an executive branch that would enforce the laws we already had. So here we go. The lie has been called out. It's a great achievement, President Trump, actually. And I think it's important that we make note of that because people are running around and saying that everything's going to hell in a handbasket. It's not. And right now I'm posting some of these articles that I talked about. Hopefully, if you guys want to take a look at these, I'm sorry about the feed not working earlier, but it's working now for some reason. And suffice it to say, we have a golden opportunity to highlight the fact that there's some big successes actually that we should be talking about every day, all day. Here is one of them. Apparently, to the great disappointment of Democrats, the annual inflation rate in April was 2.3%, which is actually a very good inflation rate. And they keep talking about how inflation's going up, but it turns out that that's a media phenomena by the Democrat media to talk the economy down. So you're going to see increasingly the lies exposed, just like we saw last year, that the Democrats are telling these things and their media people are telling these things to convince everyone that the economy is failing and that they can talk the economy into a recession. Apparently that's not really happening. So there you go. More fake news. Fake news is the enemy of the people, as President Trump has said many times. Going back to the border, here's something interesting. Whistleblowers say that the human trafficking hotline actually failed to report tips to law enforcement. Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa, is scrutinizing a multi-million-dollar grant for something called the Polaris Project to run the hotline after learning of a whistleblower's allegations. He said that this 501c3, the Polaris Project, was administering the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and it regularly failed to refer tips to law enforcement for investigation. So you call a hotline, you spend millions on it, it doesn't actually report it to law enforcement. And so this is they're spending $5 million annually. And Chuck Grassley has let the HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. Know about this, and I think some heads are going to roll. They said that some of the reports of sex trafficking were stamped, quote, work not required, unquote. And so I think some people should be going to jail for this. This is just heartless and inexcusable that someone would have the courage to then call a whistleblower hotline to report sex trafficking and nothing is done about it. Zero. Something that is also being done now is the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is saying that the Biden era domestic terrorism policy must end because it led to massive abuses of power. And we know that this is where they were chasing down non-criminal behavior, such as Catholics going to conservative Catholic churches, parents going to school boards. And they were prioritizing stuff like this, claiming that it was right-wing domestic terrorism, while they were actually not pursuing actual terrorists. And as we know, the drug kingpins were welcome to the country. They're squealing now that those people are being deported. So good for her, and it's about time. Meanwhile, even though President Trump's doing his job, back here in Oregon, we're finding that the Oregon economy has dropped in the business rankings again. Oregon fell to 44th in the chief executive's annual best and worst states for business ranking. It was released on April 28th, and it now says that Oregon now ranks higher only than Washington, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, New York, and California. That is not good company to be in. And it is a descent into the bottom 10. It dropped 7 places from where it was before. And this is not good news for Oregon, but you'd think that all those bills, those 33 bills I read to you before, would be doing something to address this. They're not doing it. It's just not on the party list. Let's see. And it turns out right now that nearly half of all, I'm trying to find it here, nearly half of Oregon families are struggling to make ends meet. This is according to a report on KPTV. And it says 42% of all Oregon households are struggling to afford the basics like housing, groceries, or childcare. Doesn't seem like those 33 bills that were signed into law are really addressing that. Probably because they don't really care because it's their fault and they wouldn't want to draw attention to that. What they do want to spend money on, and even more money on, is the highway system. And it turns out that the I-5 Rose Quarter, which was supposed to come out of a tax that was added back in 2017, supposed to be widened and improved both for traffic purposes as well as the surrounding neighborhood. They apparently have now had to tell people that the cost is going to hit $2 billion to do this. So as they don't do the project and it constantly gets blocked, it now costs even more money to do it. That's a sizable increase of about $500 million since the initial estimate was put forward. And I guess 2023 was the last time they estimated it. So it just keeps going up and they keep asking for more money and they still don't do it. The I-5 bridge now is apparently going to cost $1.9 billion. Now that figure to me sounds low. And it's I-5 bridge work. Sorry, I-5 bridge work. They're going to have to replace the interstate bridge. And so that's not the bridge across the Columbia River. That's just the replacing an existing bridge, which they have to do because it won't survive an earthquake. Meanwhile, they continue to spend hand over fist on mass transit, except that a great revelation is hit about mass transit. TriMet is wondering where 30 million TriMet riders disappeared to. They are admitting that they have gone from 100 million rides a year before the pandemic down to 40 million. And now they're at 66 million, 30 million fewer rides than they had the year before. We're in a situation now where, the pandemic has been blamed for everything, but now clearly there's something else going on here. They can't explain why people don't want to ride it. I think they should write it and find out. One piece of good news, but also much overdue, almost a duh when I think about this, is Portland is thinking on waiving infrastructure fees so that they can begin building housing. Gee, how many years did it take for them to think of that? And they studied this in 2022, and they're only now beginning to think that they're going to do this. And they could, these fees actually add between 3 and 6% to a single family home and between 4 and 10% to multifamily projects. And they still are so far behind in building any homes. It's time that this got addressed. Anyway, that's my shortened show for tonight. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a great rest of the week. And again, thank you for joining me on this episode of The Captive Audience.